Hello and welcome to the video tutorial for section 2 of the Moody Blues blanket. We've finished our 9 squares which form section 1 and they've all been joined together, and section 2 is actually a border going around the 9 squares in the centre of very simple 2 rounds of a granny square. And this is the most basic granny square, very simple to do. There are 28 in total to get all the way around, and again they're joined with the continuous join as you go. Now as this is a strip of squares which are going all the way around, it's very difficult to show you on under this camera. The join as you go is just a little bit different from when you're joining 9 squares together. This is more like a strip. So I will be showing you in a video tutorial how to do this. But first of all, we're going to make a very simple granny square. And as I say, 2 rounds of a granny square. So that will be our first task. This is our little granny square. 2 rounds, as I say. And very easy. There's not much I can really explain about it until we actually just start making it. This colour is pale rose, and it is the very first one that we'll be joining to the blanket, so I thought I would just use that as our sample. So we've got the pale rose, Stylecraft Special, and my 4mm or size G crochet hook, and I'm going to start with a slip knot, which is what we used when we did the first squares in section 1, and I'm going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which I'm sure you'll remember, and then I'm going to go into the very first chain with my crochet hook and pull through the yarn through the 2 loops, and that gives us our starting circle. And again, like before, I'm going to chain 2, which is the equivalent of the very first treble stitch. We're going to work these 2 rounds in treble stitch, which is the UK stitch, and the US version is double crochet. So I've chained 2. I'm going to yarn over and find that hole in the center, pull through your yarn and make your first treble stitch. And then I'm going to do that again. So I've got 1 chain 2 and 2 treble stitches, and that's the first part of our little the first round of our little granny square. I'm going to chain 2 now, and that's going to turn into a corner, and now I've got 3 trebles to make because this is the second side. 1, 2, 3, always going into the center, and then I'm going to chain 2 again and put 3 trebles into the center, and we're moving round each time. Chain 2 again, and let me show you what I've done. I've done chain 2 and 2 trebles to start. Chain 2, which makes a corner, which you'll see more clearly when I'm finished. 3 treble stitches, chain 2, 3 treble stitches. I've chained 2, so I've got 3 more treble stitches to put in because this is a 4-sided square that we're doing. Sometimes when people say they've gone wrong with something, with a pattern, and I've looked back at it, they've maybe put in 1 too many groups of 3 trebles, which turns this into a pentagon rather than a square. So you want 4 groups altogether. You're finishing off with your 2 chains for the corner, and then back to the very first group with your chain 2 and 2 trebles, and we're going to slip stitch. Now, strictly speaking, I should be slip stitching into the top of the first chain 2. That, like I've said before, can be quite difficult to find and to get your hook into. There's nothing really wrong with slip stitching into the top of the first treble. It's much clearer to see and pull through. And that looks a little bit like a circle just now, but believe me, that is the first round of your granny square. Now, the way I do a granny square, I chain 2, and this time, after I've chained 2, I'm going to turn it over. I always turn my granny squares after every round. It keeps them from going squint, and it keeps them with a nice straight edge around the side. So I've turned this over, and here is my chain 2, and here is the corner that I'm going to be working into. Now, this chain 2 is right at the extreme right hand side of this big space here. So what we're going to do is a complete corner in this first square. So we've chained 2, and I'm going to put in 2 trebles. And as always, you make the corner by chaining 2. And then I'm going to put in 3 more trebles into that corner. So that corner number 1 is fully finished at this point. You can see we've got the right angle. And then I'm coming round to do corner number 2, and again it's 3 trebles, chain 2, and 3 trebles. And there you can see how this really is beginning to become a very obvious square. So there's no chains between these groups of corners. We're just going straight to the next corner and chain 3, treble 3, 1, 2, 3, and chain 2, 1, 2, and treble 3. And that's the third corner. So we've got 3 complete corners done, and I'm going to make my last corner now. Treble 3, chain 2, and treble 3. 1, 2, 3. And because we did a complete corner for the first one, all we need to do is slip stitch into either the top of the first treble or the top of the chain 2, whichever you can find. And I can cut that now. As you can see, I'm working with all my leftovers from the blanket. There's all these little balls of yarn left over. So I'm pulling it through, and that is our first granny square. There's the big hole again in the center, but when, like you did in section 1, if you pull that tight, when you come to make your, to sew in your end, that will close in. So you do the same thing as you did in section 1. You sew it around the perimeter of that center hole and go back the way and pull it really tight, a couple of back stitches to hold it in place. Now, the only other thing I'm going to say to you about this is that it's my preference. This you would class probably as being the right side, because you've finished, this is the round that you've just finished, and that's right side uppermost. But I'm going to ask you to turn it over to the wrong side. And this is the way that we're going to attach these squares see, I don't know if I can show you it on my blanket. Let's see. Find the square in question. Actually, it's the other way out. Here we are. So these squares have been made with round 1, round 2, and then turn to the reverse side. And you can see the reverse always looks a little bit curlier. But the reason I've turned it is because I like, where possible, to have a wrong side attaching to a right side, and it's always the right side that we use for joining. We didn't do that in this first square, let me remind you, because the square wasn't double-sided. We did have the flower that we had to have at the front, so the last round of this square was on the front. But normally when I'm attaching granny squares, the last round is wrong side uppermost. So that's the way we're going to attach them to the blanket. So as I said, in the pattern you will find that there are 28 squares. This is a bit higgledy-piggledy, but I've made all my 28 squares and I've put them in the order that I have asked you to do them in the blanket. This particular round is quite random. The colours don't repeat in each other. I don't remember, without looking at the pattern, how many of each colour you had to do, but you'll see that in the pattern. And as I say, I've speared them onto a knitting needle as my method of storing them. And I've put them onto the knitting needle with the very last square that I'm going to attach with my join as you go at the bottom, and the very first square at the top. So we'll just pull them off one by one when we're working, and that way you don't need to think about where the colours are supposed to go. You've already planned it, put them on your skewer, and it's very easy to do the join as you go. So I'm going to leave you at this point with what I call my yarn kebab, and I'll be back in a minute to start joining these squares onto section 1. See you in a minute. Now it's time to attach all these squares to section 1 of the blanket, and the joining stitch that we're going to do is continuous join as you go again. And remember that you always make your joining stitch on the front of the blanket, never on the back. So what I've done here, which I forgot to do earlier on, was I've just popped a stitch marker into the front. So it just happens to be in the very middle square of the blanket, but that is my guide to remind me anytime that I'm doing a joining stitch, the blanket is on the front. Now, of course, that means that these little squares are on the wrong side, or at least the last round is on the wrong side. So I've attached my yarn, and it's the same, it's the variegated James C. Brett Stonewash. It's the same one as we used in section 1. I've attached my yarn in a corner of my first square that I've just pulled off my yarn stack, and I'm going to chain 2 and put 2 half trebles into that corner. So we're still working with half trebles for the join. And then there's only one space up the side of these small squares, so there are 3 half trebles to go into that space. And then we come to the next corner, and we're going to just put in 3 half trebles and stop at that point. And then what we need to do is look for the corner space on the blanket, and no chains at this point. We're just going to put your hook into that corner space and slip stitch through, and that's the first stitch to attach the square. Then we've got to finish this square off. You'll be quite used to doing this after having done section 1. So that is that square completed, as you can see. And then we're going to find the next space along in the blanket and slip stitch. And then 3 half trebles in the next space. 1, 2, 3. Along to the blanket and slip stitch in the next space. You can see what that looks like. And we're next coming along to the corner, the next corner of the square. So we need to put our 3 half trebles in there. 2, 3. Slip stitch into the space in the square, in the blanket, and then you can swing it round and come down the side of that square. 1, 2, 3. This is actually more straightforward than when you were doing the continuous join as you go in the centre, because we're just doing 1 round. So we've got to put 3 half trebles into that centre, the middle space, and then we come down to the bottom and 3 half trebles into the corner and stop at that point, because it's time to pick up square number 2. And you'll see that we're not going back along at this point. That will be done later. So the next thing we need to do is pick up the next square and lay it alongside. And we've done our 3 half trebles in that corner, and we're going to put 3 half trebles in this corner. Slip stitch into the next space along. And slip stitch into the next space along. I'm way ahead of myself. I've slip stitched into the next space along, and I'm going to put 3 half trebles into the middle space of the second square, as you can see. So these 2 corners have only got half of their corner made, and we're going up the side of the square into the next space, and we've come to the corner already, because these are such small squares in comparison to the centre ones. So that is 3 half trebles. I'm just going to free my yarn, which is getting tangled. Right, now we've come to this point where you have a space in the blanket that you've already put your slip stitch into, and we also have a corner, the corner of this square here. So what I recommend you do is, we've put our 3 half trebles into this corner, and I'm going to slip stitch into the corner of the square first of all, and then I'm also going to slip stitch into the space in the blanket, and then finish off my corner with 3 half trebles. Now, the reason I've done that is it just makes it a slightly more secure join at this point. If you slip stitch just into the blanket, there's a tendency for the join to pull apart a little, so that's holding it nice and firm. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the next space and into the middle space of my square with 3 half trebles. Oops. And we've got one more space on the blanket before we come to this join. So we're going to slip stitch into that and then 3 half trebles in the corner. Now here we've got 2 corners, and again I recommend that you slip stitch into one and then slip stitch into the other, just to make it nice and firm. I'm actually going to take that back because I used to do that. Just forget what I've said over the past couple of minutes. Let's just go back to this corner. Right, so we've done our 3 half trebles in this corner. Now, what I'm suggesting, because I think it works better, is instead of slip stitching into that and into that, let's go diagonally across to this corner and make our slip stitch. That corner has not got anything in it, but then remember we'll come up with square number 3 and we can slip stitch into that corner when we do that, and I'll show you that in a minute. And so finish off the square with the 3 half trebles, or the corner of the square with 3 half trebles, like that. And then you'll come down like we did before, 3 half trebles in the bottom corner, and then pick up the next square to start joining. And again, nothing happening along the bottom edge at this point, it's still unworked. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down 3 half trebles, 3 half trebles, and then start coming up the 3rd square, and I'll see you when I get back to this point. So square number 3 has been attached up one side, and I've got back to this top part where we've got this join between the 2 squares from section 1. And as we slip stitched diagonally into the corner of that square, we're now going to slip stitch diagonally across to the other square, and then we can finish off the corner of the 3rd square with 3 half trebles. There we go. Just put that there for you to see. Now what I'm going to do is, you've got the gist that we're going around 3 sides of each of these squares. So I'll continue along here until I get to the end, and I'll show you how we go around the corner with that. And then I'll take it all the way around, and then I'll show you how to do the bottom edge once we've done that. So I'll see you at this point, or rather this point. I've just popped back before I've got to this corner, because as I've been working along, I just thought I would remind you of what happens at the joins. When you are joining, like I was joining this square, when you come up to the first join, which is in the middle of the large square from section 1, you have slip stitched from this square corner into the blanket space, and when you come up the side with this square, you slip stitch into both the corner of this square and also the space in the blanket. Then when you get along the top and you get to this part where the 2 squares join, you slip stitch straight diagonally across to this square. Because we've got 2 spaces in the blanket here, we're going to just diagonally slip stitch across to the corner of this square, and then we can continue down. So it's just treated slightly differently whether you're in the middle of a large square or at the corner of a large square. So I'll just get down to the bottom. I might as well just do the last of these squares to let you see, and then we can get on to going around the corner. Actually, there's 2, isn't there? 2 still to go. Yep. So we've got 1, 2, and this one is actually going to be the corner one. Can you see that? I'm actually going out of camera. So I will go round this one, and I'll go up and round this one, And like I said before, I'll come back at that corner point. So this is the next square, this is the corner, and I'm going to swing this round. It's always better to swing your work round so that you're working in the right direction. And we've done the 3 half trebles in the corner of the last square on that side, and I just need to go over to this one to put in my 3 half trebles. And we can slip stitch as usual into the next space in the previous square, 3 half trebles into the middle space of the corner square, slip stitch, and let's start the first of the 3 half trebles, the half of this first corner. And you can see that we've got 2 corners here. So let's slip stitch diagonally across to the corner in the square of the blanket. Put in our slip stitch, swing it back round again, and we can go off on the 3rd side of this square. That's completing that corner, and down side. There we go. So that's now attached. This is sticking a good bit out from the main part of the blanket, and it looks a bit of out on its own at the moment. But then as soon as we pick up the next square, I've just pulled it off the kebab, and I want to make sure I get the right one. It's this one here. And you can see that this has allowed us to go round the corner, and we just need to work as normal around the 3 sides all the way round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way round the rest of the 3 sides of section 1, and I will see you again when I get back to the corner where it all started. Well, here we are. I've come all the way round the 4 sides of my blanket. You can see that they've all been joined. There's still this outside edge which is unworked, and that's what we're going to be doing next. And I've just come back at the point where there's 1 more square to fit in, the last jigsaw in the piece. So I'm going to just do that just now, and it will only get joined on 2 sides because it's got 2 outer sides, and I'll just do that. 3 half trebles. I'm going to keep myself in camera here. Slip stitch. Oops. Catch that. That's it. 3 half trebles. This is decided at the very last square not to cooperate. There we go, 3 half trebles, and then I'm going to slip stitch diagonally across, and then 3 half trebles. Now in the previous corners you didn't have anything to join to at this point, but we do because we're back to where we started, and we have a square, the first square sitting there. So I'm going to have to join it. So there's my 3 half trebles into the to finish that corner in the silver square, and this is sitting waiting to be slip stitched into. 1, 3 half trebles, 1, 2, 3, and another slip stitch, and once we've done that, we'll be at the corner. So I've got my half of my corner, that just push that end out of the way, half of my corner to do. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to just push the camera up a little so I can see it a little bit. That's better. And it's time to just make the final join, which is into this corner. Nothing is cooperating in this last square. There we go. And just slip stitch into the corner. Told you nothing's cooperating. There we go. Slip stitch into that corner and 3 half trebles. 1, 2, 3. Now, as you can see, what's happened is we've got to the outside of this very last square, and I've completed that corner. So now there's only one direction to go, and that is all the way back the outside edge. And we're going to do that, go right round the outside edge, and we'll come back to this point here. So there's no joining to be done at this point. We're just simply outlining the last edges of these little squares. And when we get to the corner, which is an outside corner, there's no slip stitches, it's not joining to anything, so we just do it as a normal corner with 2 chains, 3 half trebles, 2 chains, 3 half trebles. So I'm round the corner now and 3 half trebles. Do you remember when you did the squares, the joins on the squares for the large ones, and when we were coming around the outside, we had these parts where there were half of each corner made and we had to get over them? That's what we're going to be doing now, so I'll just do a quick reminder of those. We've got the center 3 half trebles, and we're at this point here where we want to put in 3 half trebles, 1, 2, 3 to complete that corner, and then we want to chain 1 and then find that space, remember, in the join, and slip stitch, and then chain 1 again and finish off the second corner with 3 half trebles. Like that. So you have all the way around, you will have simply 3 half trebles in the middle, and then the 3 half trebles, chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1, 3 half trebles, all the way around when you hit these joins, and then at the corners 3 half trebles, chain 2 and 3 half trebles. So it's a journey again right round the outside, and then when you get to this point, I'll come back at this point and show you what it looks like finished. So my journey all the way round the outside edge of these squares has come to an end, and I'm back at the point where we started with the pale rose square. And I've just, I'm just going to put my hook back on here. So we've come round all the sides, remembering to do that special little bit where we're in the join with the chain 1, slip stitch, chain 1 between each of the corners, and the outside corners got 3 half trebles, chain 2, 3 half trebles. So that was quite straightforward, and it's now got a nice outline around these squares. Just let me say, one thing I found when people have contacted me making one of my patterns and the subsequent parts of the pattern that they've been working on haven't fitted in, and they think they've made a mistake. The mistake is very often that they've forgotten to do this outer edge. So remember that when you've gone round 3 sides of those squares, there's still the bottom edge to work before they're finished. So as I say, I've come all the way along and I'm back to where I started. And let's have a look at this first corner where we started. We only had 3 half trebles in it. And so that's what we have to do now, is to finish that corner with 3 half trebles. I'm just looking to see if yeah, I already did that. That's what yeah. So I've put my 3 half trebles in that corner, as you can see. And we just need to slip stitch into the opposite corner to finish off. And that's it. So this is the section 2 part with the small granny squares complete. I'm going to tag on the next part of the pattern into section 2 as well, and that is some nice stripes to go around this to edge it. So I'll be back in a minute to show you how to do that.